Week 8, Set 2, SWYK 2. Here we go, folks. I wanted to take a look at this thing that I wrote on the side here. A times B equals 0. Now, if you know that two things multiply together to give you 0, and we call those things factors, by the way. Two things multiply together to give you 0. What do you know about one of those two things? I'm hoping you're going to say one of them has to be 0. That's exactly right. Now, we're going to use this logic. You've got to understand this logic because we're going to use this logic to solve these quadratic equations with factoring. So you have to have something that's factorable. If it's not factorable, we've got other methods we're going to use, and they're more complicated. Factoring is by far the easiest thing to do. Now, when you see that something's factorable, like question 1, so you factor it and you got your q minus 5 and your q plus 2. These are the two factors that multiply together to give you 0. So what do we know? We either know that q minus 5 is equal to 0, or we know that q plus 2 is equal to 0. We know one of those two things. Then we simply solve each one of the equations. Obviously, the first one is q equals 5, and the second one, q equals negative 2. That's why those are the two answers. It does say use a comma to separate your answers as needed. Okay? Moving on. So in the next one, we factor it. We got s and s, two things that multiply together to give us 9, but add up to negative 6, so that would be negative 3 and negative 3. Notice that they're both the same. So when you set the factor equal to 0, you only have to do it once because it's exactly the same. Why would I do it a second time? That would be a waste of precious digital ink. Okay, so when I add the 3 to the other side, I find out that the only answer to this question is the number 3 itself. Okay, when you get down to question 3, it says use a table. Don't do it. We're going to factor it, okay? So just continue doing the same exact thing. Factor it, set the factors equal to 0, solve. Okay, moving on to question 4. Is there a GCF? Yes. Okay, now, so the GCF here was just plain old x. So we pulled the x out. That left us with x minus 23. If you don't believe me, then you can just distribute the x back in. You'll go right back to the beginning and feel like you wasted your time. Now, once we've factored out the x, set each factor equal to 0 and solve. The reason I'm saying it like that is this. If you set x equal to 0, there's no solving. Isn't that it? Right. So when you set the other factor equal to 0 and solve, you find out that 23 is the other answer. So the two answers here are 0 and 23. You're going to find that when you factor out something and it has an x in it, or an x squared in it, or an x cubed, you're going to find that 0 is actually one of your answers. So same thing happens on the next one. I noticed that in order to do the factoring, I'm going to have to push all the terms over to the same side. Then I can factor it. They both have a 4x. Pull out the 4x. When I pull out the 4x, that gives me x minus 1. Set the two factors equal to 0. 4x equals 0. Of course, we can divide by 4. What are we going to get? 0. Yes, that's right. Add the 1 to the other side, and we find out we get positive 1. So, those are the two answers. Moving on. Oh, yeah, back to the double magic trick. So I did have to subtract 8. Push that over to the other side, right? Then once I got it to this point, I asked myself, is there a GCF? No, there's no GCF, so I don't have to worry about that. Then I just start with the magic trick, right? I take the 5 times the negative 8, I get negative 40. I factor it, so I'm looking for factors of negative 40 that have a difference of 6. That would give me x plus 10 and x minus 4. The 5 comes back in front. Push the 5 back in front of both of the x's, and then look for the GCFs. Pulled out a 5 and I got an x plus 2. I can't pull anything out of that one. Now I want to show you some shorthand notation that I saw from one of my students, last year I think is when I first remember seeing it, and I thought that was kind of clever. Notice what they're doing right here. They said let's just take x plus 2. Oops, got to lock it in place, otherwise it looks stupid. X plus 2 equals 0, right? They just put their little equals 0. They almost made it look like an exponent. I know it's not an exponent, folks. They're just trying to save themselves the trouble of rewriting it, which sounds good to me. We know that negative 2 is the answer out of that. So you do the same thing with the other one. Set 5x minus 4 equal to 0, solving it, and then you add 4, divide by 5, and you get 4/5. So the two answers to this question, one's an integer, negative 2, the other one is 4 over 5. Now, if you want to write it as decimal, be my guest, I don't care. As long as the question doesn't say it has to be a fraction, and clearly this does not. So those would be the two answers to the question. Question 7 I have eliminated from the homework and the test because the numbers are too big. I mean, if you take a look at this, I won't belabor it too much, but 16 times 21, we were up to 336. We were doing like w squared minus 38w plus 336. Okay, we don't need to get that big of numbers, so I got rid of that question, so you don't have to worry about it. Question 8 is another similar type question, but what I want you to notice here is I had to take all of these things on this side and push them over to the other side. So I had to subtract a 3x, and that took my 12x down to 9x, and I had to subtract a 5, and that gave me a negative 5. So then I had to say, is there a GCF? No. Then I could go into the whole double magic trick process. The 2 times the negative 5, that gave me the negative 10. Then I could factor it normally, x plus 10, x minus 1. Bring the 2 back in front of both of the x's. Look for a GCF. There's a 2 right there in that one. I can pull that out and give me x plus 5. The other one doesn't have one. So, once again, it's that, ooh, I didn't even use my little trick, man, that I did in the last one, where I just go like this, equals 0, equals 0. I don't know why I didn't do that. And then start solving, and of course we get negative 5 on the one, comma, and positive 1/2 on the other one. So that wraps up this episode of week 8, and I think you're ready for the second assignment for the week, and then your test. Talk to you later.